What is OpenEUDebate? OpenEUDebate is a Jean Monnet network network coordinated by the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, with the participation of what we like to see as two sisters university, the VUB and the ULB, and the National School of Political Science and Public Administration in Bucharest, and Agenda Pública. What is the main aim of our project? Is to match policies with politics. And in so doing, to create a platform that connects debates in Europe at local, national, and European level. We work as a network connecting the knowledge on EU issues at local, regional, and European level, so to create an evidence-based debate among decision makers and citizens across Europe. We try to do this, and we will do this in a non-partisan way that does not exclude any scenarios. We don't take parts, we are not partisans. We want to have a debate that is as open as possible, as based on facts as possible, as rational as possible. And I think we all agree that rationality is the thing that we need in today's debate about Europe. So, our ambition is to become a forum for critical thinking about the European project and its futures. This is why the debate that is starting now is called Critical Contrasting Views about the Future of Europe. To put you in the pictures, ladies and gentlemen, this morning and during the last few weeks, more than 100 people answered an online survey. In these online surveys, we asked 3 questions. I'm not going to spoil you because Ramona will present them in 1 minute from now. But basically this morning we had the occasion to gather together in what we called what is World Cafés to discuss these questions. And we came up with a list of answers and points for you. And we would like you to address them in the future debate. So I give the mic to my colleague Ramona, so that Ramona can present the speakers and start the debate.
Thank you very much, Luciano. So what we have in this panel, we have candidates for the next European elections. I will present them very briefly in alphabetical order. So I will start with Maria Arena, a member of the European Parliament and of the group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats. She's a member of the Committee on International Trade, the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality, and also a member of the delegation to the EU-ACP Joint Parliamentary Assembly. She's a candidate of the Belgian Socialist Party for a new seat in the European Parliament, so for the next European elections. Then we have Saskia Bricmont, a former student of our Institute for European Studies. Let me start with this, Saskia. I'm very pleased to have you in this panel. So Saskia Bricmont is the co-lead of the Green Party, Ecolo, in Belgium for the next European elections with Philippe Lamberts. She served as conseillère communale in Ath from 2012 to 2015 and as a delegate to the European Green Party from 2010 to 2014. She works in the public sector and she teaches law and international politics. And from what I saw from her website, she defends 3 values: justice, solidarity, and equality. Then we have Petra De Sutter, a medical doctor and a professor also at the University of Gand, member of the Belgian Senate and of the Council of Europe until this year, from 2014 until 2019, and she is the lead candidate for the EU election for the Green Party, Groen, in Belgium. And her aim is to reduce inequalities and social justice and to fight for a healthy environment. And then Luis Garicano, Vice President of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, ALDE, who will be the lead candidate for the Spanish Ciudadanos party. He has developed an extensive academic career at the University of Chicago and the London School of Economics, where he has been also full professor and chair, visiting professor at MIT and also at London Business School. And probably you will tell us maybe later, the French President Macron, La République en Marche, we will see maybe later this evening. So what we would like to do in this panel is that we would like to address with you the 3 questions we discussed this morning with our audience, students and citizens. So the first question will be about European leadership. And the question is, what is your message for the next president of the European Commission? So that would be the first question. We will see the question, we will try to discuss this question one by one, and then we will show you the results of our consultation with our audience. And then we will move to the next question, which is on European policies. And this second question is, what are the main problems of the EU today? And then the last question is about European priorities. What should be the main priorities of the EU after 2019? So we will address the questions one by one. We will show you the results of our consultation, and then, of course, we will try to have a dialogue with our audience, so we will collect also questions from the participants. So, Luciano, I will give you now the floor for the first question.
Thank you very much. So, the first question, I will read them again, the 3 of them. What is your message for the next president of the European Commission? The second one is, what are the main problems of Europe today? And the third one is, what should be the main priorities of the Europe for the years to come? So what we would like to do, as Ramona said, is to address the first question. We will ask each and every one of you to state the main message for you for the next president. Then we will go on showing you what is the result of the debate, and we will open the discussion to the public. So, may I ask you to be the first one? What is your message for the next president of the European Commission?
Well, thank you for the question. I don't know how much time we have. Just a minute or?
3 minutes for the first round of questions.
Okay, so 3-4 minutes each. Okay. Well, for the next president of the European Commission, I have been thinking about this. There's so many things we can ask, leadership, more leadership, for instance. But I would rather talk to the Council rather than the Commission, because I think one of the major problems of the EU right now is the role of the Council that every time again can block easily all kinds of policies that are proposed by the Commission and by the Parliament, which is often very progressive in its proposals. So I think the real problem is there, and we should address it there. I'm just giving an example. I think we need more fiscal union in Europe, for instance, and this is one of the major issues, to have a fair and social Europe, which probably is one of the priorities I will come to later. And one of the things there is, of course, that the Council always blocks because of the veto right, and there's no way that member states are willing to give up their sovereignty, and always will call upon a subsidiarity principle to block whatever they don't like coming from Europe. So I'm not sure whether I will really ask something to the President of the Commission rather than show leadership in its relationship with the Council. I don't know if you want me to answer the second and the third question.
No, maybe just the first one. Maybe we will
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I must say that my first question and my first priority for the President of the Commission, the Chair of the Commission, is to be sure that this Commission is gender balanced. Because as you know, last time the proposal coming from the European Commission was to have less than 30% of women in the European Commission. So my first thing is to be inclusive and to be sure that we will have a gender balanced Commission. This is my first hope for the next Commission. And my second one will be, you have to change your policy. And I agree with Petra when she said that the Council has a lot of power because they have the power to block. But the Commission has the power to propose. And I think it's important to take this power and to change the way they are proposing things, and not only proposing things, neoliberal things, and we will be in disagreement with my colleagues Luis, but proposing things in the line of more social and more environmental issues. I will take just one example. I was yesterday with different NGOs about the corporate responsibility. how to make companies responsible for human rights and environmental rights. And the Commission said, oh, we don't want to work on this. You know that there is something to deal with at the UN on this corporate responsibility. And the Commission said, we have no mandate to do this. We have no mandate, political mandate, and the mandate is coming from the Council. And I said, oh my God, it's really strange, because when it comes to discuss with Donald Trump about a new TTIP, it's the Commission that put the mandate on the table of the Council, saying, we want you to give us the mandate. So they took the initiative to go to the Council to receive the mandate. But when it comes to something, human rights and environmental rights, they just don't want to take the mandate. So changing, they have to change if they want Europe to survive, they have to change.
Thank you. Well, the thing is that with Petra De Sutter van Groen, we are a common family. So we might agree on a lot of things today. So I'll try to be as complimentary as possible with her, hopefully. So maybe it's time, as you say, 50-50 Commission, but why not also a female president of the Commission? That would be maybe even better in time. And I would address her several messages. The first one would be that there's probably no time left. No time left for real climate justice, no time left for a real democratic Europe, for social justice, and to stand up against all those tendencies to misogyny, racism, and hatred. It's time now for change, to have a real Europe based on equal rights, on a feminist policy and diversity. That would be my main messages, I think, to the President. And I would like to have a Europe that would be a very strong global voice for solidarity, human development and peace. That would probably be my message, and I would tell her it's no or never.
So I enthusiastically endorse Saskia's idea that it should be a woman, that president of the Commission. I have a particular person in mind, as you can guess, Ms. Vestager. The thing that I would try to emphasize is that this is an extremely important moment for Europe. This is a moment as important as any we've had in 70 years, because it is the first moment in which there are forces that want to destroy all that we have achieved, that want that have a chance to gain power in many countries. And I would try to tell her that we need to both fight against these forces, but also fight against the reasons that these forces have grown. And to me, what is basically going on in our world has to do a lot with the technological change, with globalization, and with automatization, and the perception that many people in the European middle classes and worldwide, that they have that this change is not benefiting them. They feel that things are not improving for them. They look at their kids and they wonder, are my kids going to have a better life than I had? And Europe hasn't been able to give responses to these worries. These people don't feel that Europe is working for them, and they don't feel that the economy is working for them. And that's why they go to those extremes and to those forces of destruction. Thus, I would say this is a moment in which Europe has to provide answers. This is a moment in which Europe has to work together in ways that are very different than what we have done in the past to give answers to digitalization. It involves everything from changing how we do innovation, how we do industrial policies, but also how we deal with unemployment, youth unemployment, training, skills upgrading, etc. We need to respond to this massive change that we are going to see. I mean, if you think about the estimates of what automatization is going to do in the labor market, maybe between 10 and 50% of the jobs that exist today are going to disappear. That's very large, and it's no wonder that it's creating a lot of anxiety in a lot of people. So I would tell her, Europe needs to change. We need to put these issues on the top of the agenda, and we need to be single-mindedly in making sure that we are solving the problems of European citizens, in making sure that they don't see this as some crazy construction of people talking about strange institutions, but that they see it as an institution that is there to solve their problems.
So there are several points: change, leadership, diversity, gender balance. Now, it is a bit uncomfortable, but if you can have a look at the results of our consultation this morning, I can read also the outcomes of our discussion. So we asked the same question to our audience, and then the responses were, in the first 5 points, more related to communication. So what our participants pointed out is more visibility of the European Union at the national level, and then more transparency in the way in which, for example, the elections and also the Spitzenkandidaten process is organized. So more transparency with regard to the process, respect for the European values. And this was one of the points that we discussed this morning. Communication. Communication was one of the items, so we discussed communication on different dimensions and what kind of communication, how to adapt communication, and so on and so forth. Communication at the European level. So this was more about how to communicate and to reduce the gap between the European Union and citizens. And then from point 6 until the last point, we talked more about policies. So green and social policies, social justice. So it was also one of the messages to communicate to the next president. Education, to be open to criticism, proximity, and empathy. And then, last but not least, considering the audience, education. So this was very, very important. Now, I would like to take some questions from the audience. If you have reactions to what the members of our panel mentioned before moving to the next item on the agenda. We have time for 1 or 2 questions. Alvaro, I see already 2 hands, so please introduce yourself again.
Hello, thank you very much. It's Álvaro Lear, a member of the Institute for European Studies of the ULB, and take the privilege that no one else asks a question. Madame Mariana, you mentioned the possible new TTIP, and I was wondering if the panel had any ideas on the potential for the EU-US trade agreement that might be agreed in the Council tomorrow and after tomorrow. So what are your thoughts on that, whether you would be in favor of the regulatory cooperation that it seems to be suggested? Thank you.
We will take the second question, maybe.
Yes. Hello, I'm Luis Boza Garcia. I teach political science at the Université Autónoma Madrid and a member of the network. And my question for candidates would be, what should be the balance of power between the Commission and the European Council? Because we constantly hear proposals and ideas on how to democratize the Commission, but I've never heard a good idea on how to democratize the Council. So is how to keep that balance of power correct between the two sides for executive power at the EU level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If there are no other... Yes, Sami, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Sami, a student in the European Institute for European Studies, sorry. And my question is, do you think that there is a link between the point 6, so social justice, and the link with more EU visibility at the national level? So
if you agree, maybe we will start from Luis Garicano.
Yes. So I would say that institutional. The two last questions were institutional issues, and a lot of the questions that come up here are institutional design issues. I fear a lot the Brussels bubble, right? So you come here, and all you hear is about balance of power between Commission and Council, EU visibility, communication, EU, etc. Somehow I feel that those are intermediate objectives. We want a Europe that works. That's what we need. And I think that we need to focus on the objectives. It's not just education, but having the skills that we need in order to compete in the new world. And it's not just green and social policies, but it's really doing something substantial, radical about plastics and about global warming. So to me, if we want to communicate to citizens, if we want to gain visibility, it has to be by doing the second and not the first. It has to be by telling to the citizens, look, these environmental problems are radically important. They are a question of life and death for our planet. We in Europe are going to be working for that. And so visibility is going to be the consequence of doing the right things, rather than it's going to be visibility what we're going to be looking for. And I think, I mean, when you're here, the debate, when you're in Brussels, and I don't know if you have a similar perception, but the debate always devolves too much into issues that, I mean, I'm not going to disagree that obviously there is a democratic deficit. We need to make institutional reforms in the governance of the euro, in the governance of migration, in the governance of environment, in all of those things. But I really would like us always to be focusing the debate on with what aim. And when you say like, okay, do we want to change that balance of power? And obviously the governments are not necessarily willing to do many of the things that are necessary. And that means we need more powers to the parliament and we need better governance. I would still emphasize for what, and I think that's what's going to solve this visibility and these communication issues.
Thank you. I start with the last question because actually your question touches already the second question that was asked to us, so the weaknesses of the European Union. And one of the weaknesses is probably the lack of social union, a real strong social union and social legislation which is as important as the economic and financial legislations for the moment. Would be legislation that would be enforced as well in the social field, but also in the environmental field. That is lacking at the European level. And I think so far one of the weaknesses of the European Union is to bring concrete solutions to the difficulties and the problems of citizens, of European citizens. I take one example. If we could agree at the European level on a minimum revenue at the European level, it would already be a step to a more social union and a response to the problem of poverty in Europe. That's one example in many others. So for sure, I think going to stronger social Europe would maybe not increase visibility, but give a legitimacy to the European construction that is lacking for the moment. And one of the problems of Europe, and it's closely linked to the absence, to the lack of social union, is that, for example, the austerity measures have led to the populist problems we are facing now. Another one is the lack of solidarity between member states to face the migration problem that brings to the rise of populism we are facing now. So for sure, a stronger social Europe would be one of the solutions. Second question about the balance, the power balance between the several institutions. I agree on the need to more democratic and representative institutions, and also transparency of the decisions, because for the moment, in the current situation, decisions of, for instance, the member states inside the council are not public. People don't know what is the position of the different member states in the council, and they actually don't know that, as my colleague Petra said in the beginning, that member states are very often blocking different measures in the council, while the European Parliament is going steps further in policies. One example going on gender issues, it's the Convention of Istanbul, which is signed for 2 years now, but still not ratified. Why? Because it's blocked at the scale of the member states. And that's a real problem, a real democratic issue.
Thank you. The first question was on TTIP. My position is clear. It is an incoherent decision coming from the Council to go and negotiate with Trump administration. And it is not coherent because we are part of the Paris 21 Convention. So, and if we want to do what we want to do for climate, it is not only to do it in Europe, it is also to do it with our partners. And having someone who just said, I don't care about climate, not only because he's totally, I don't know how to say that, but because of the competitiveness of the US industry. So it is a question of business. This is not only a question of Donald Trump. It is a question of competitiveness of the US companies at a short term, because we know that when it comes to climate, it costs more money for the future, but at a short term, it is more competitive for a company not to be respecting the environment, not to respect the environment. So if Trump said, I don't want to respect climate, and if we said, we want to reduce the carbon emission, it will have a cost for European companies. And if we decide to have this TTIP, even if it's a very small one, we are just putting competition between our companies respecting environment and US companies not respecting environment. So if Trump decided not to respect environment, we don't have to discuss a new TTIP with Trump. This is the first thing that we have to say. And the second thing is, you know that Trump decided not only not respect the environment, but also not respecting the international law of trade. The WTO, he just decided not to respect the WTO. And so, and we as Europeans, we have in front of us someone who just said, I don't want to respect environment, and I don't care about WTO, and I want you to respect me. I think that we are totally crazy. So if the Council, and it is why I totally agree with the fact that we have to have decision from the Council being published, being public. If the Council, if one country of the Council say yes to this mandate, it is totally a wrong decision, and we have to blame this country because it is not a European position. So we have to blame for it. So it's really important that we make this pressure. But it is not the situation. We as Parliament, we have not the power to say no at the beginning. And it is why I think that it's not normal that the Parliament has not the position for the mandate. Because it is not only a question of member states, it is a question of European politics. So we have to have this decision at the first step on the mandate. The Parliament has to decide for the mandate. I think it's really important to ask for it and to change the rules. And it is not normal. I take another example. We were discussing about the maternity leave. We have had the position coming from the Commission, a position coming from the Parliament, the same position. So we decided together to improve the situation of maternity leave. And the Council alone decided not to discuss about it. And after 5 years not discussing about it, we just lost the maternity leave directive just because the Council decided not to discuss. So I think it's not normal that one institution of the Europe can decide alone when you have the Parliament and the Commission together saying, yeah, we can do something on it. So on this, it is not a question of institutional debates. It is, if you want to do something, you need to have this balanced way of deciding into the different institutions.
Yes, well, a lot to discuss. Yes, I fully agree on the Council, of course, and the transparency and the fact that we need to go to qualified majorities instead of unanimity for many things, because this is happening all the time. Every good initiative by the Commission, by the Parliament is being blocked by the Council, so we can't continue like that. I was just wanting to go back to the question on social justice and on why people feel that the EU is failing them. And I think that I heard from you the globalization, digitalization and so on. But I would tend to a bit disagree and say that the whole European project has been designed around the market, of course, and economic subjects, without being a political, and of course not social union. And this is lacking. You can't have just a financial unit, Eurozone in Europe without a fiscal policy, without a political union and having a shared vision on where to go. So this is why people feel that the EU is failing them. So social justice is indeed connected, I would say, to the person asked that question, to of course the visibility at national level. I would say national level is the problem, blocking exactly the coherence of social policy at the EU level because of the construction that we just discussed. And I think that this is maybe, it's intentional. I wouldn't say, well, the world has changed and we didn't see that and suddenly we failed in reacting to it. It has been a neoliberal project from the beginning, very intentionally. Don't be deceived. I would be much more radical in what I say than my two colleagues here. I think this is absolutely the way that the EU wanted to go. And well, I see, of course, that citizens don't follow this anymore, and they feel left alone, and that's why the Brexit. We will discuss Brexit in a moment, I guess. People don't want to be part of this union that doesn't represent their rights, their interests, their values. No social, no environmental interests, and that has to change. That really has to radically change if we want to win people back for the European project. I won't go into TTIP because we had, of course, the previous discussions on TTIP and on regulatory cooperation. You mentioned that. We've been against that from the beginning because we think it will lower our standards, social, environmental standards, and so on. I know very well the endocrine disrupting chemicals subject. I've been working on this scientifically also for 20 years. I think this is really a very important issue in the whole free trade agreement. But of course, now we have Trump, we have everything that he said that makes it impossible, I think, to go into that again.
Thank you very much. So time is passing by very quickly. The discussion is very interesting. Allow me just one side comment before going to the second question. I'm very happy that I heard the word urgent. It is urgent to act because, and this is a rhetorical question, sometimes I think, are the European institutions, now the Parliament is here, so obviously you will tell me we are very aware that this is urgent, but sometimes you really get the idea that the European institutions do not perceive how urgent some problems are. And I think this is also what the citizens are asking for the climate discussion, for the climate manifestation. I'm also happy that you are asking actually for more Europe, because this is also in line of what we discussed before. You are asking for more Europe in a moment in which probably we don't know yet the results of the elections, but we are all asking ourselves, we will have more Europe at the end of May. So let's go to the second question. The process is the same. I will ask the question, I will give then the mic to you so that you can answer briefly, and then we open the discussion. The second question is, what are the main problems of Europe today? We started already discussing this. And I'm curious to hear what you will tell us, please.
Yeah. It's just what we said. I think that the main problem are the member states. Yeah, I think it's really the problem that we are confronted to. When you say that it's difficult to take a decision in Europe, but I'm coming from Belgium. You know, we have every week people in the street, young people on the street, to march for the climate. And we said with the leftist parties, we have to have a law on this. And it's not possible in Belgium, a country from 10 million people, a little bit more, 10 million people, it's not possible to have a law in Belgium. Can you imagine the situation in Europe if in Belgium or in France or in other countries it's not possible to take something so important, so urgent? Do you think that it will be easy at the European level if you don't have this national leadership for Europe. So for me, the most important thing is to have a national leadership for another Europe. Because, for example, if you take Macron in France, sorry, for La République En Marche, he's for Europe, but not for changing Europe. He's with the same model for Europe. And so we are not going to change Europe with Macron. What I want is more leadership to change Europe, to have another answer for Europe. But we need member states, and for the moment, we don't have these member states.
Thank you. Yeah, we started discussing this topic, and I'll point in these questions the main problems Europe is facing, and then we'll go to the solutions, because I think it's important, especially here, as Democrats and as Europeanists, to also have a vision for the future, because we want Europe. But the thing is, one of the problems is that Europe is far away from its fundamental values, and the values that were at the construction of the European are not respected anymore. That's one of the problems. But one of the others have already been pointed, I think. It's climate and social justice, and also democracy. Why climate and social justice? Because they are the main issues of our century. Climate change is the biggest challenge we are facing now, and it's also a social and an economic issue, and a gender issue. Air pollution and all the health problems we are facing, and they are costing millions of euros. The huge loss of biodiversity we are facing, there are real challenges for generations. The second issue is probably the lack of guarantee for the protection of essential human rights and the respect of the rule of law. We said it, the different austerity and anti-social measures also in migration issues have led to the rise of extreme right parties and populism in Europe. So that's a big challenge for Europe, and we need a stronger social union, we need more fiscal justice, we need more solidarity in Europe, also to face people's needs and to fight against populism. Third issue coming to this is the reinforcement and the adoption of a real social union. We know today that 1 person on 4 in Europe is in a poverty situation and a risk of exclusion, of social exclusion. 1 on 4. That is huge. 25 million of children facing poverty in Europe today, when Europe is one of the richest parts of the world. That's that's a problem for Europe today, and we can't measure social progress only on the rise of the PIB, GDP. Thank you, which is the current model. All the development is based on economic and financial issues. We need a more social and environmental Europe. And economy and the finance should be at the service of human development and social progress, and the respect of the resources of our planet. Fourth main challenge is the democratic one. I said it, fighting the rise of populism through several policies, but also the democratic question of European institutions and the huge power of the lobby today. Corporate lobby, multinationals, economic, pharmaceutical lobby, agricultural lobby also. We need more transparency and another system in decision making.
Thanks, Saskia. Let me just answer a couple of comments that were made and that kind of are to the point here. So the first is Europe a neoliberal project, or has it been a neoliberal project? I would say to that comment by Petra, I would say, look, it's a liberal project. It's been a liberal project. And it has been the project of liberalism in the broader sense of European liberalism, which is, let's, instead of fighting in the battlefields, let's fight in a table over some shape of the bananas there. Brits get all upset that the European Commission had something on the shape of the bananas. It's like, well, better to be fighting over the shape of the banana than over other things that are much more, that citizens are going to take much worse. And it's very related to understand this single market and to understand these priorities that Europe has been having for many years. It's very relevant to understand where we are now. Look, why is Europe opaque? What are Europe, all these bureaucrats, all these rules, all these markets, etc.? The reason is when you are trying to eliminate sources of conflicts on whether my oranges can go to your country or not, etc. The European method, which is somebody goes into a room and discusses, we don't know what's going on, they come back and they tell us, you know, oranges will be orange from now on, okay? Some bureaucrats decide what's the shape of an orange or something. It doesn't really affect the deep national sovereignty of voters. They don't feel bothered either way. That's the European method. It works. Somebody in Brussels is doing those things. Over the last 20 years, things have changed. Europe has gotten very deeply into matters that affect directly the sovereignty of voters, which are monetary and fiscal union, EMU banking union, first. Second, migration, borders, Schengen. So EMU is 91, Schengen is 95. Those two big decisions were made without appropriate institutional backing. Those big decisions mean now this bureaucratic kind of obscure method affects things that I as a citizen care hugely about, right? Am I going to have to pay more taxes? Or will the Italians be able to pay higher pensions? Well, some bureaucrat in Brussels say that we can't because we don't have money. But the government says we can. How can this bureaucrat in Brussels be interfering? When this is about the shape of bananas, nobody cares. When it becomes about the shape of the budget, then people care. So we have gotten into a lot of deep sovereignty-related matters without really changing the way things are done in Brussels. And so I really do think that what I would call the liberal project of getting a single market where we can all trade, where we can all move, where we can all go to different countries, has been massively successful. Massively successful. There's no question about it. Okay? You are all, many people here are doing Erasmus, coming from Madrid, going to another place. All this is success of Europe. We have 70 years of peace, which is the longest period of peace, I think, since probably Marcus Aurelius, right? Since the end of the Pax Romana. So we're talking about a long, successful time for Europe. And now the question is, we need to adapt what we're doing to this new world. And there are all these new challenges. We need to change how we do. So I would say these are the challenges. We have to change how to do banking, economic and monetary union. We have to change how do we deal with the single Schengen space, migration, asylum, etc., which is our citizens are concerned about how this has been done. We have to have much more effective policies to address the environmental crisis, the climate change in particular. I think I agree with all my colleagues on that. We need, as I said initially, to have Europe be able to respond to the massive digitalization, artificial intelligence challenge that is going to change radically our lives. And just one fact, of the 20 biggest internet companies in the world, 11 are American, 9 are Chinese, 0 are European, okay? So that tells you how unprepared we are for these challenges. So that would be the fourth challenge that I would say we need to address. It means, I think Europe has to change. I think it's unfair of Maria to say, well, Macron cannot lead the change because he wants the same Europe. I mean, I think this Europe has been, to be honest, led by the Socialists and by the Popular Party, while all this populism has been growing. And I don't think Macron represents the forces of stasis. I think he represents the forces of change. I think Macron wants to really change how Europe works. And I think we need to provide new solutions to all of these problems. I would say that's the agenda for me, would be those 4 items. And I think that in order to deal with them, we need to understand the source of the democratic deficit. And we need to understand that there was a reason Europe worked like that. There was a reason these dark rooms, smoke-filled rooms, were a solution to certain things 30, 40 years ago. And that is the reason they can't no longer be the solution. That's why transparency and democratization have to be a big part of the solution.
Yep. No, I think I assume the fact that till the 19, a little bit before the 19, socialists and EPP were working together, because it was a kind of contract saying that if there is growth in economy, you have to share this growth. And it was what we call the modèle Renan, saying that we trust the social partners, the employers and the employee, and we share this growth between employers and employee. And I assume totally the fact that we were part of it. Okay, after the 19, we have seen EPP and ALDE becoming real aggressive on the economic side, saying we don't want to share anymore. And if you want us to share, we will go in another country, in another continent, and we will organize this competition to weaken the social part. And since the 19, after the falling of the communists, the right wing said, now we have no more alternative model, so we don't need to discuss with the leftists. And this was really the fact that after it was difficult to have this kind of compromise with the EPP and ALDE, and now at the European level, they don't need us. They have the majority, EPP, ALDE and ECR, the conservative. When we come with an environmental law, with a social law, for example, you take, for example, the social pillar, it was not possible to enforce the social pillar because it was a group of right wing not willing to share. It's what I said, we are living a hard attack in the European level. We have at this pump, you are pumping the blood and you don't want to redistribute it. And we are dying from this. And the old Europe was meant to redistribution. And now we have no more this kind of compromise at the European level. And we have to restart a compromise. I think it's important. We are not winning at the left or at the right side. We are winning together on this redistribution. And this is really important to come back to this.
So I think even a very short... Yes, well, you are the boss.
You can answer.
We will take your response and then we ask Saskia and Luis Garicano to react to Maria's last comments.
Thank you. I will be brief because a lot has been said. I agree that Europe has been successful. It has been a very successful project, bringing with the internal market, welfare and so on, but also inequality. And I think inequality is one of the failures of the European Union that has led to dissatisfaction of many people. Coming on top of that financial crisis, coming on top of that refugee crisis, which I don't call a refugee crisis, it's a European crisis, if you ask me. But that all has fueled dissatisfaction, anxiety, fear, and very clever populists have jumped on that and have been using that to take power. Populist, nationalist powers that brought into the discussion identity politics, And this is the crisis where we in today in Europe. So we of course we have to talk about climate. I think that's the major issue, because we were discussing the policies or the problems that we're facing. But the whole existence of the European Union will also be the fight between pro-European people that have the same values and that we probably share for a major point, and then people that want to disintegrate Europe because they want to go back to the member state level, and then of course they will attack gender equality, they will attack LGBT rights and so on because of their conservative views. We see this happening in Poland, in Hungary, in many countries right now, even Austria, even Western European countries are not immune for that. And I think that will be the major struggle, I would say, that we'll have to face in the next 5 years, because I identified 3 problems where we have to deal with: climate, Brexit, and Orban. That were my 3 words on which I could discuss these whole issues. But well, since we don't have too much time, I will leave it at this.
Saskia, Groen and Luis Garicano, there's disagreements, and the aim of the panel is to have contrasting views, so please you have the floor.
The thing is that hearing you, I was just thinking that this is the illustration of the way people and citizens disconnect from our systems. Because, of course, we have to face all together populism. All Democrats or progressists have to face together populism and to be strong together. That's right. But if we don't change the model, if we just keep going on in the same economic, liberal, productivist model, then we're just running faster to the wall. I mean, there will be no change, and there will be no stronger Europe, and there will be no more visibility and identification to the European project. So that's probably the main challenge we're facing. And for me, traditional parties' lack of vision and of a global vision of where we need to go to change this system and to have a real change in our policies, as well as at the European level, as at the national and local levels. Because if we don't have a current way of working from the local level to the European level, then we won't win the fight for social justice, for climate justice, and for democracy.
So I take exception with the idea that liberals are trying to or would like to dismantle anything about the European social model. I mean, I think it's very clear if you look at Germany, the model of the post-war Germany has at its base the ordo-liberal approach, which is basically a state that is strong enough to make sure that it enforces the rules. The market cannot work without rules, and the welfare state is essential for the market to work. I think rather than see these 2 aspects in contrast, I would invite you to see them as 2 sides of the same coin, right? You cannot have economic freedom, which means dynamism and means change, without a very strong welfare state, because people will be scared and they won't allow for that economic freedom. They will be worried. And you can't have a strong welfare state without creating wealth, without an economic system that is dynamic and that works. So both sides are absolutely necessary, and I don't think liberal parties would be in any way trying to give primacy of one over the other. I mean, I think there's no question about it. And second, on change, I agree with Saskia. I mean, change is necessary now. We have to agree, all of us have to agree, that the way Europe has been working now is going, and I think her simile was perfect. I mean, it's going against the wall. We're going to hit a brick wall. If we continue doing things as we're doing now, and we continue ignoring what people are telling us, what they are yelling, which is that they don't like where things are going, we're going to have a big crisis. We might go back to the 30s with nationalism, with all those things that Petra was saying about Orban and all that. I mean, it's very scary. It's a strange and scary moment. So we do need to change. Well, we can't, like the Americans say, throw the baby with the bathwater. We can't change and forget what made this liberal system succeed. What made this system succeed is trade, it's negotiation, it's sitting around the table working together. I am sure, and I have no doubt about that, that if we are all elected to the European Parliament, we will be all on the same side fighting against nationalism, populism, and fighting against climate, etc. There's no question about it. But I think that in the same way as liberals have to agree that the social safety net is essential and that environment is an absolute key concern, I think the left has to agree that you can't just run an economy without allowing for trade and for dynamism and for the free market system that actually provides the prosperity for all that to work.
Thank you very much. Questions from the public? I see 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. You already had a question before, so we give space to those to begin. Very short question, and please very short answer, because there is still one pending question for all of you.
I'm going to try to be fast. My name is Elena García Guitián. I'm from the Autónoma Universiteit of Madrid, and I'm one of the members of the Jean Monnet network. And during the whole day, we have been listening about the problem of the relation between politicians and citizens. We all presume that there is a gap between politicians and citizens. So my question is going to be very general but personal to the candidates in the way how they see themselves. Are you citizens relating to other citizens? How you think you will improve your communication with other citizens because you are representing them?
Thank you, Adam. So another question was here, please.
I have a question to Mr. Garicano. Actually, in correlation with what you said about the lack of competitiveness of the EU companies in the digital field, and I would like to ask you, in the context of the failed merger between Siemens and Alstom, Bruno Le Maire, the French Minister of Economy, and his German counterpart, Altmaier, they said about, they started the discussion about the redrafting of the competition rules in the EU. And Chancellor Merkel is also very willing to follow their suggestion. What do you believe? Do you share these views?
Thank you, Sturgis. You had a question, right? The last one, and then we start answering them.
Thanks. Now I would like to focus on the point 4. And so do you think that the point 4 with it, like actually environmental policy and climate change, is compatible with the liberal model of the Deputy Garicano?
So we have 3 questions. I will start with Petra. I know that you have got a time constraint.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Very different questions. I will answer your question. I think I'm locally politically active in the city council. I go in the street, I go talk to people, and I go to listen to what is important for them and try to translate that in my political work within my own party. So I'm in the Senate at the federal level, I'm in the Council of Europe at the European level, I'm also in the city council. I think all these levels of politics are important for our citizens, to bridge them and to try to understand what's important for them and to translate that politically. And back to them. If we do something in Strasbourg, we need to explain what we've been doing and why it is important for them. And it's as important to have, you know, bicycle lanes in the streets as to discuss why the Russians have invaded Ukraine. And this is what we discussed in the Council of Europe. So I think this is how to connect with people. And as politicians, we have to talk to people and go in the streets and visit them at home. For me, that's very clear. Second thing is the climate change policy, because I think you addressed your question specifically to our colleague on the merger and on the EU regulation there. But in terms of climate change policy, is it compatible with a market system, and will we lose our competitiveness if we raise our own standards? I guess that's a bit what you mean. Well, I think that we can be able to set the standards, and that we, for instance, we're in favor of a carbon border tax even. I know it's very controversial, but I hear many people, even liberals, are in favor of that. We have to think about that, to raise the standards and to be very firm on other countries that are trading with us that do not accept the Paris Agreement. And we discussed Trump, but of course we're thinking about China as well. We need to do that, and I'm sure that we are able to raise the standards all over the world by doing so. And I see my colleague is nodding, so he agrees with that, so I'm very happy with that. I don't think there is necessarily a paradox and that we will lose our competitiveness. I think Europe should take the lead in innovative technology fighting climate change. This will, even from an economical point of view, be very advantageous. There is a lot of technology to be developed which can bring Europe to the leadership of this, and we don't have to be afraid for that. We can really raise the standard all over the world and also create a lot of jobs with it and so on. Going to renewable energy, we can go into the details, of course, but it is very clear that there is and there can be and there will be an economic advantage to do so, because the carbon bubble one day will explode, and so we can take the lead there.
The answer on citizenship, I think we are citizens, and perhaps in a small country just like Belgium, it's easier to be citizen and political, because you are just you are in a special country. Perhaps it's more in the northern country that you can just walk without having security, without having. I was in Italy, and it is quite different for a political minister, senator to go in the street without being with the security bodyguards. I have a colleague, she is Cécile Kienge. She was Minister of Equality. She's coming from Congo, so she's black, and she was really harassed in Italy, and it was necessary for her to have bodyguards because it was really insecure situation in the country. We are not living these kind of things in Belgium, so I think it's easier for us to be public and citizen, and we have no difficulty being connected with people. There is something else. We are connected, but sometimes people are not connected with us, and saying, "Oh, you are here. You have children? Oh yeah, it's really strange. Yeah, I'm not in plastic. I'm a human being." And sometimes people are really surprised to have people like us there. So sometimes it's the media that are building an image of what we are not exactly. So we have to work with it also. When it comes to the question of climate and trade and our society, I think that we have to be coherent. We can't say we are for climate change and at the same time signing trade agreements that are not respecting climate change. For example, I'm fighting at the European Parliament, and my colleagues, it's not from you, Luis, I think perhaps we can share something, but for the moment, at the European Parliament, I'm working to have in the trade agreements, because we are not against trade. If you take the Greens and the Socialists and even the GUE, la gauche radicale, they are not against trades. What we are willing, what we want is to have something else in trade agreements. And for example, we are fighting to have sustainable chapter, mandatory sustainable chapter with sanctions for companies not respecting it. And it's impossible to have the agreement coming from the Liberals and coming from the EPP to have this sustainable chapter being mandatory with sanctions. So it is totally blocked at the European Parliament when it comes to change the model of the way we can do change. We can do this kind of trade and this kind of change. So I hope that Luis will be elected and supportive on this kind of change when it comes to trade, but not only trade, but I think it's a kind of example where between what we say and what we do, there is a gap, and so it's necessary to be coherent on this.
Thank you. On the first questions on the gap between citizens and elected people, I'm not elected for the moment, so I'm a citizen. And in my job, I'm fond of co-construction processes, collective intelligence, and so on. It's starting now, a couple of years ago, and also in the transition movements, and so people work together. It's just natural. It's just us people working together and going further, being creative, being innovative, and I really want that this model also goes to politics. We are lacking that for the moment. We're not working in common intelligence to build political decisions. There are several tools that could be implemented. For example, the Citizens' Initiative, but there are several lacks, several things that don't work in this process, so it needs to be improved. Also at national levels, and now the German-speaking parliament in Belgium just put it in place. It's a panel of citizens working in parallel with the elected parliament, and the MEPs will have to study the proposals issued from that citizens' parliament. That's also an interesting experiment, I find, that could be reproduced to other parliaments. So there are different channels that should be implemented besides the vote, because the elections are one of the ways to democracy, but shouldn't be the only one. So I think there are several things to be done to close this gap, and then you also have the content of our policies, and that goes back to social issues and others that really respond to the problems and needs of the people. Then going to that, the link between our liberal system, the current one, and fighting climate change. The thing is that the current model produced the situation we are facing today, which is a highly polluted system, which is the degradation of our environment, exploitation of environmental resources. So the whole model is built on the use of resources and humans as tools. A sustainable model that stops climate change, that reduces our emissions, can't go further that way. It's a model where human beings are in the center and development is for them, for their well-being, and a model where we use sustainable, renewable energy. And of course, it's a whole new developments that are creating jobs. Several studies, economical studies, have shown that we can create more than 18 million jobs netto. Of course, jobs will disappear in traditional sectors, but step by step, and reconverted to green jobs in renewable energy sector and so on. So I have to close. Okay, so I don't think it's compatible. We need a model change to really fight and have a real change in the situation we are facing now.
So I'll try to be very, very quick because we're out of time. So on this last question, since that's up to build, well, I'll start with the one on the distance between politicians, and I share Saskia's situation. I have never been a politician. I've been a professor. I'm teaching a class next Monday, and I will discover that distance briefly. I hope not to. I hope to avoid that distance, and I think social media and so on might help to do that, and many of the other things that were mentioned. Quickly, on environment and capitalism and liberalism, I could not disagree more with Saskia and with that view. I mean, there is no contradiction whatsoever. I mean, you can put any level on cost. You could put an infinite cost on carbon and just destroy all carbon emissions, and you would still have a capitalist system. You can use taxes. And Petra was talking about how do we do that with trade? How do we do it with trade? It's very easy, right? The border tax, you raise, imagine we raise our level of environmental consciousness and we reduce CO2 emissions, and the US and China want to export to us, and they compete unfairly by just dropping these requirements. Well, we can just say in the border, we are going to put the exact same tax you would have had to pay if you had produced here. And that's a liberal system because it's free trade, but it allows us to say to other countries, you want to do what you want, that's fine. But if you want to trade with us, you're going to have to respect the environment. So those things are perfectly compatible. Now, on the third, on the competition policy, the problem of the world is not too little. It's not too much competition policy. It's too little. There is a massive increase in concentration in every sector, from banking to retail to services. Every sector is getting oligopolized. Why? Because of technology, because information technology means that fixed costs become a much bigger component, that variable costs are very small. So if you're very big, you have very low costs. So what we need is, for example, let me just give you an example. Facebook owns Instagram and WhatsApp. So many of you think, oh, you know, I'm not using Facebook anymore, I'm using Instagram. Well, you're still using Facebook, right? So there is no real choice. It's the same company. So should the Commission use less competition policy or more? It should use much more. There should be a structural solution to that. The idea of the European national champions has been discussed for 30 years. In the 90s, when I was in the College of Europe in Bruges, it was, you know, in 91, it was like, oh, there shouldn't be. I think this is fantastic. That Europe has a strong competition policy that depends on citizens is a foundation of our model, and we have to fight tooth and nail to protect it.
Thank you very much. The discussion was very interesting, rich, and we had the chance to contrast different views on different topics. It remains us to thank the panelists. Thank you very much for your presence this evening with us, and we wish you all a very meaningful and also successful campaign. So thank you very much. I would like to say also thank you to all of the students and participants to our discussion and debates today, from ULB, VUB, from Bucharest, from also Autónoma, from Madrid. Thank you also to the members of the network, OpenEUDebate, colleagues from Madrid and also from Bucharest. And I would like to say a few words to thank the team of the Institute for European Studies. So thank you very much, Maria Isabel, Aurélie Rousseau, and also Renaud de Kerk, Morgane and Gilles. Gilles is there, Morgane already left. So thank you very, very much for your help, because this event without your help wouldn't have been possible. So thank you for your participation and enjoy the evening. And I hope we stay in contact to discuss other questions on other topics.